President Trump faces a deadline on the Iran nuclear deal, and his new Secretary of State heads to the Middle East. But what do Iranians really want, and how do they get it? Is climate change man-made or just more mumbo-jumbo? We'll bring you some inconvenient facts. And can Google manipulate your online search results to change opinions and influence elections? These segments and more. And it's all right here, right now, from the Global Lane. Mike Pompeo's first trip as Secretary of State included stops in Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. Discussions about Iran topped his agenda. So what steps should be taken to overthrow the Islamic theocracy and restore democracy to the Iranian people? Well, joining us is Misag Parsa. He's a sociology professor at Dartmouth College and author of the book Democracy in Iran, Why It Failed and How It Might Succeed. Okay, Dr. Parsa, first, some of us remember the Shah, but has Iran ever really had a democracy? And if so, why did it fail?
Democracy became possible as a result of 1941 invasion of Iran by the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. And the United States helped to establish a sort of democratic institutions during that time, which lasted until 1953. But the most democratic part of it, really, that period from 1941 to 1953, was mostly from 1951 to 1953. And then that came to an end as a result of oil dispute between Iran and Great Britain. The United States ended up intervening and overthrowing Dr. Mossadegh and putting an end to democratic institutions.
And we saw the Green Revolution crushed in 2009. More recently, the protests late last year, and I think they even went into January a little bit. How could a pro-democracy movement actually succeed in Iran?
I argue in the book that it would be very difficult for Iranians to achieve democracy without another fundamental change, which I call it a revolution for lack of another term. So the regime that's in power in Iran actually is more repressive than the regime that it replaced. That was during the Shah's regime, people had greater economic rights, people had greater social and cultural rights. So everything had improved during the Shah's regime compared to what we have now. The new regime, once they took power, they monopolized the political power, they promised democracy, but then excluded everybody that challenged them or competed against them, became rivals. And then they also seized the economic assets of the country. The vast majority of the assets are now, more than 50% are controlled by the clergy. Another about 25% to 40% controlled by the Revolutionary Guard. A part of the economy is controlled by the state. The private sector basically has disappeared. Of course, many of these things, Iranians, both men and women, have been resisting against what the Islamic Republic did and imposed all those restrictions upon the population.
How can we eventually see democracy return to Iran?
They need to go on strikes. So the working class and the merchant class should shut down the economy, should shut down the factories, businesses, all of those things. And that would paralyze the economy, and that would render the regime completely vulnerable to overthrow. Becomes much easier. So once the regime is isolated, they would have to repress the people. Once the regime confronts all these strikes and protests, they would have to bring their repressive forces. And those repressive forces that belong to the Revolutionary Guard, which is a main part of the support for the regime, and the Basij, which is a paramilitary force, along with the police, they would not be enough to repress them. So they would have to bring the army out. Once they bring the army out, more than 90% of the army are conscript, and they would most unlikely shoot the people. And that will bring an end to the regime that has been repressing its own people for almost 4 decades now.
Now, in this desperation to maintain power, what would the likelihood be that, like Assad in Syria, how likely would this regime be to use chemical weapons against its own people?
Well, it would be sort of difficult for them to reach that kind of situation. And the main reason is that...
But would they do it? Is it beyond them, or would they actually do something like that?
It's for right now, nobody is really talking about. We are not even sure to what extent they're equipped, and they are already prepared to do it. We don't have any sign that the regime is ready to bring out chemical weapons and use it against its own people. But they do their regular repression, shooting people, arresting them, putting them in jail, torture, and killing them while they're in jail. Over 20 people were killed during the recent protests in the street.
What do you think the United States should do? What should our policy be towards Iran?
The United States should make sure that doesn't do anything that would unite the Iranian people ending up supporting the regime. Ayatollah Khomeini's regime was almost overthrown when finished 1980, 1981. Saddam Hussein attacked, and that ended up uniting the people and the government fighting against an external enemy. That's one important thing that the United States should be very careful to prevent. Right now, they are very divided. It's very polarized. The regime is becoming increasingly isolated, and the regime actually would like to have an external enemy, which is always death to America and death to Israel and so forth.
So how would pulling out of the nuclear deal then affect that?
The nuclear deal is not a major concern for the vast majority of Iranians, but the issue is that for them is the issue of human rights and freedom and democracy. And whether they pull out or not pull out, for Iranians, the vast majority of them is to get rid of the regime. This policy, this treaty and the other treaty with external powers is not the issue.
Okay, so keep pressing for human rights and democracy in Iran. We're out of time, but Dr. Misag Parsa, we thank you so much for sharing your insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
The people of Iraq will be going to the polls May 12th to elect their leaders. Iraqi Christians have seen their numbers dwindle from more than 1 million just before the Iraq War to no more than about 300,000 today. What do they want from their leadership? What role can American Christians play in helping them? Well, joining us is Julianna Tahmooressi. She's senior fellow at the Philos Project and president of the Iraqi Christian Relief Council. Julianna, what are Iraqi Christians hoping for with this election?
The people of Iraq in general, as a whole, they want to have prosperity, and they're tired of being just used as victims, and they are ready to hit the reset button to move forward. In terms of the Iraqi Christians specifically, within the 329 members of the parliament, we have 5 seats that belong to the Christian community. And what we want is to elect people that are really true blue advocates for the persecuted Christians inside Iraq, to bring about the right policies within the Iraqi borders, and also be really the just voice for all of us within Iraq on the international stage. The persecuted church in Iraq is truly tired of this continuation of the suffering that is inflicted upon them, whether it's economical, education, and really trauma, because they're inflicted with such trauma as well. We cannot forget that, but we're really hoping with a new way forward starting May 12th.
We know many Christians have returned to their homes in cities like Karakosh, but how many are still homeless and in need right now?
Within Iraq, we have less than 200,000, about 200,000 left. About 60,000 have returned to the plains of Nineveh, where originally this is our ancestral homeland. Frankly, in Jordan, we have about 40,000 Iraqi Christians that are displaced inside Turkey. Inside Jordan, we have about 15,000, a few more in Lebanon. So prior to 2003, as you mentioned, we had 1.5 million Christians there. Prior to ISIS return to Iraq in 2014, we were about 400,000. Although people within Iraq are staying put, they're trying to start their lives. I just came back from Iraq 2 weeks ago. The hope is there. The conditions are really hard.
So we know about the emotional toll that the war has had, and also the physical toll, of course, on their homes and so forth. But what about the trauma? Are they dealing with that? What can be done about it?
Well, there are some smaller organizations that have brought some programs, but there's really nothing comprehensive on the ground in Iraq. What needs to happen is instead of, or in addition to building communities in terms of brick and mortar, their homes, their streets and churches, there must be real attention paid to building the human person. But I appeal to the world community to pay extra attention to building the human person.
What's the best way, Julianna, that American Christians can help?
You know, my organization, the Iraqi Christian Relief Council, has been on the ground since 2008. And I go there twice, 3 times a year to oversee the projects that we bring to the Nineveh Plain and other places in Iraq. And you have to give to the organizations that have a strong presence there.
Is American aid getting through? Because I know I've talked to Nina Shea in the past, and she said some of that just was not really getting to the people. It was going through the UN and to camps and wasn't really getting to Christian people.
Yes, Nina is absolutely correct. A lot of that aid has not reached the people on the ground. Again, I was there 2 weeks ago. I saw the suffering is very real. Some homes are being built, churches are being erected very fast. But the economy suffers. The key is to really bring the economy back, job creation back to the Nineveh Plain, because people are waiting. People are waiting in Jordan potentially to return. People in Turkey, from Turkey, want to return to the Nineveh Plain. If people are giving in the UN, they have to be really conscious of where the money is going. The UN is not doing as much work as they're saying, and if the aid is given to the Iraqi government directly or to the Kurdish government directly, I promise you, Gary, most of it, if not all, is abused, and there's a lot of corruption in that country.
So what should we as Christians do beyond providing physical relief? How can we pray for them?
First and foremost, prayer is important. Fasting is important. We have to pray for the leadership. Not much of this is discussed out in the Christian world. We have to pray for the leaders that are just in Iraq to rise to the occasion, to help to stand with the persecuted church. We have to pray for the Iraqi government, for their leadership, because back in 2014, in January of 2014, the Council of Ministers decided that the Nineveh Plain should be given to the Christians, but not much has been done because of the rise of ISIS and because of the atrocities that were committed. So we have to have our own province, which is the Nineveh Plain. It has to be protected by our own men and women, which is what we want, to have a province of our own within federated Iraq under the Iraqi constitution, but it must be autonomous.
During his recent visit to Washington, French President Emmanuel Macron pushed for the United States to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. Speaking before a joint session of Congress, Macron said, quote, "We're killing our planet. Let's face it, there's no planet B." So are we killing planet Earth, or is this just more liberal mumbo-jumbo? Well, joining us is geologist Gregory Wright. He's just written the book Inconvenient Facts, the science Al Gore doesn't want you to know. Okay, Mr. Wright, I guess by that title, you don't agree with Al Gore or President Macron. Are we killing our planet? What have you discovered from your research?
Oh, boy, it's completely 180 degrees opposite. What I've found is the science, facts, and data actually support the fact that the Earth is prospering, it's flourishing, it's greening. We're not diving into or spiraling into some climate apocalypse events due to our sins of emission, but rather the Earth's ecosystems are improving because of rising temperatures and increasing CO2. And by extension, humanity's benefiting. And that's just a huge untold story. And you'll never hear any of these benefits of increasing CO2 by the mainstream media. We just hear of gloom and doom and projections of death.
Yeah, I think Al Gore in his 2 movies basically showed apocalypse. Shrinking shorelines, floods and cyclones and earthquakes and everything imaginable. So I think there is disagreement in the scientific community, though. First they said global warming, then global cooling. Now I think they're just saying climate change. So which is it and why?
Oh, well, you lost the last one. It was climate disruption now. You got to get it right,
okay.
Gary. You got to get it right. So it's climate disruption. But no, I like to use, I live in the real world. And what I've done is I compare and contrast a lot of the things your viewers have heard about, increasing desertification, increasing fires, famine, intense heat waves, those things. We're being told that that these are going to increase, and these are based on predictions based on climate models that actually can't model climate very well. We see that the climate models overpredict warming by 2.5 to 3 times too much. We see, if we look actually in the real world, my book, the last half of the book, I look at the climate apocalypse events, and we see what's actually happening based on science, facts, and data. Many of these are actually declining. And I like to use forest fires as a great example. Everybody thinks that forest fires are increasing. Before I got into this, I did. I thought forest fires were increasing. Who wouldn't, after all we hear on in the media to hear about this? But actually, the experts on forest fires, people at the Canadian Fire Service, in the United States, the National Interagency Fire Service, these people tell us that forest fires have been in a long-term decline, and importantly, this is the big thing, the experts tell us that they're declining because of increased soil moisture that's due to rising temperatures and increasing CO2. What they've done is look at fires for the last 100+ years over the Northern Hemisphere and see a significant decline in those.
How concerned should we be about rising sea levels?
Well, sea level recently started rising about the year 1800 as we were coming out of what was called the Little Ice Age, the horrific Little Ice Age, I might add. Half the population of Iceland perished. The River Thames froze on a yearly basis, and the last time that happened was 1812. So we've been slowly coming out of this really, really cold period. Some people have called it the long, slow thaw. And thankfully, thank God, we're warming. People don't have to worry during the warming periods how they're going to feed their family tomorrow because there's plenty of food. But then when it gets cold, in each case we see collapse of civilizations, famine, pestilence, mass depopulation. So warm is good, cold is bad historically.
Ice and snow melt in the North and South Poles. Now, some people say we're seeing a shifting of the magnetic poles. You're a geologist. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't. The shifting of the magnetic poles is fascinating. It occurs from time to time. I'm told we're due one. We've never seen one in the modern times, but it's happened so often that it's had no detrimental effect as far as we can tell. But when you talk about warming of the poles, Antarctic ice sheet, all but what's called the Antarctic Peninsula, is expanding. The ice is expanding in Antarctica. And the northern polar ice, the fact of the matter is, your listeners may not be aware, but you could melt the entire northern polar ice sheet and it would scarcely affect sea level. And the reason for that, you're going to go, whoa, what are you talking about, Greg? But recall that the northern polar ice is floating on water. All right, Antarctica is not, it's linked to so we're floating on water. Imagine you could do that experiment at home with some ice cubes and a glass. You can melt the ice and the water level doesn't.
Well, we're running out of time, but before you go, I've got to ask you about the Paris Climate Accord. That agreement, should we stay in or should we get out?
Donald Trump was very, very right in getting us out of there. It's kudos to him. Kudos to Scott Pruitt, who needs to have a finding that CO2 is not actually a pollutant and get rid of that.
Gregory Wrightstone, geologist and author of the new book, Inconvenient Facts, The Science Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know. Thanks for your insights.
Thank you, Gary.
You've heard about Facebook and the censorship of conservative opinions like those of Diamond and Silk. But what about Google? Can the popular search engine manipulate what you see and thus influence opinions and even the outcome of elections? Our next guest shares her concerns with us. Megan Barth is co-chair of the Media Equality Project, and spokeswoman for MediaEqualizer.com. Megan, thanks for joining us. And we know how Russian trolls tried to influence American opinions online. So tell us about Google. Can they do it? Are they doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. Google is influencing elections. And I don't think we have to really look much farther than 2012 and 2008 to look at the manipulation that Google undertook in order to influence elections, specifically in the favor of Barack Obama in 2012. We do know that the former Google chairman, Eric Schmidt, left his position in order to help the Barack Obama campaign and the Democrat Party. And he crafted basically a data scraping method that was used later by Cambridge Analytica. But he worked alongside the Obama campaign in 2012 and their engineers within the campaign in order to garner 100 million Facebook profiles, including additional data, where Eric Schmidt and that data team is credited for garnering approximately 5 million votes for Obama in 2012. Then fast forward to 2016, whereby Eric Schmidt again, through WikiLeaks, is exposed to be really a mastermind of the Hillary Clinton campaign when it came to harvesting data and using data and manipulating data in order to change voting opinions. There is a study that was done, a behavioral study, which shows that a 50-50 split of undecided voters can change to a 90-10 split due to the manipulation of the search results that Google provides those who are conducting the search. You see this quite often. I, as a writer and as a talker, will often research many different issues. And if I research Hillary Clinton, for example, back in 2016, and I put in Hillary Clinton is, it would say Hillary Clinton is wonderful. Hillary Clinton is winning. We're talking about a candidate, Hillary Clinton, that was under FBI investigation, but that never came up with the Google search. And so Eric Schmidt and Google have been manipulating results in order to influence undecided voters' opinions, but moreover, Eric Schmidt has also been using his many resources specifically to start two companies to help the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. Those two companies were Civius, and the second company was called The Groundwork.
Well, how specifically are they doing it, Megan? How might they change their algorithms to accomplish this?
Well, we see both Facebook and Google have both changed their algorithms in order to suppress conservative content, suppress conservative news. This has impacted financially many conservative outlets and media organizations. If you do a Google search, for example, and the first results that you will get on the very first page, which they consider, as Google claims, their top quality journalism partners, you will see CNN, MSNBC, The Atlantic, Vox, many left-wing liberal publications, but you will not really see Fox. You won't see Daily Caller. You won't see any even center-right or even center publications. So this partnership that Google and Facebook have undertaken, specifically in the media, is awarding their progressive partners in the media and punishing their conservative enemies.
And I know our viewers are mostly concerned about the censorship of Christian beliefs on social media. How common is that, Megan?
Well, it's very common. You know, we were just researching something related to a Jewish organization that had a Facebook page of hundreds of thousands of people, and their Facebook page was just taken down because their name kind of rhymed with Nazi. It was really a ridiculous type of statement that Facebook had given them, or a reason. We're still looking into that, but Christian organizations are targeted. Christian organizations fall on the side of conservative ideology, so of course they're targeted. They too, because of the manipulation of search results, are feeling the impacts, whether it's through their social media outreach or their finances, due to the fact that their content is being suppressed.
Megan, is this a growing trend? I mean, how alarmed should we be about online thought control?
And I'm glad you put it that way, because this truly is thought control. Google and Facebook are manipulating the type of knowledge that you are able to access, the type of news that you are able to access. And without having access to a variety of different opinions and different sources, you then are kind of manipulated and conditioned into only believing or thinking a certain way, or being led and manipulated without even your knowledge that you're being manipulated.
Okay, I think the concern is Russia, 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 but it really probably needs to be about Americans manipulating the information we receive. So Megan Barth,
That's correct,
of the Media Equality Project, We appreciate your efforts. I'm sure you're going to keep on top of this. Thank you for sharing your insights.
And thank you for sharing our insights. I appreciate it.
I must weigh in on the so-called entertainment at this year's White House Correspondents' Dinner. Here's my take. Like many American Christians, I was offended by Michelle Wolf's so-called joke about Vice President Mike Pence and abortion.
Mike Pence is also very anti-choice. He thinks abortion is murder, which, first of all, don't knock it till you try it. And when you do try it, really knock it. You know, you got to get that baby out of there.
Not funny. The taking of an innocent life is no joking matter. Wouldn't it be nice to see Wolf and others in the so-called entertainment industry be as concerned for the unborn as they are for children who lose their lives in school shootings? Now, let's take a look at how the White House Correspondents' Dinner used to be. First, from 2012, this is Jimmy Kimmel poking fun at President Obama.
Mr. President, you remember when the country rallied around you in hopes of a better tomorrow? That was hilarious.
And at his last Correspondents' Dinner in 1988, President Ronald Reagan poked fun at himself.
But with so much focus on the presidential election, I've been feeling a little lonely these days. I'm so desperate for attention, I almost considered holding a news conference.
You know, it was all in just good fun, not spite, not the cruel, vicious attacks we saw this year. Michelle Wolf called presidential press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders a liar. Then she said this.
And I'm never really sure what to call Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You know, is it Sarah Sanders? Is it Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Is it cousin Huckabee? Is it Auntie Huckabee Sanders? Like, what's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women?
Ms. Sanders truly took the slaps with grace and turned the other cheek. Take heart, Sarah. The attacks were really not against you, but what and who you represent. You're a successful feminist. You've demonstrated that. You can do the job of White House press secretary just as well, perhaps even better than a man. The problem many members of the mainstream media have with you is that you're a conservative. You don't think like them. And you're a Christian, an ambassador for Christ. For that, many in the media and entertainment industries hold you in contempt. But really, it's all about their disdain for Christ. Sure, you speak on behalf of the president, but when it comes right down to it, you belong to Jesus. And he reminds us that those who don't love him won't love you. In John 15:17 through 19, he tells us, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I've chosen you out of the world. That's why the world hates you. White House correspondents, enough with the spite. Next time, do a better job of vetting your entertainers. And let's all show more love. Love goes a long way in winning friends and influencing people. Well, that's it from the Global Lane this week. Follow us on Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.